Hey moms, it's Laura Ollinger. Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. Because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world.
Hello and welcome to the show today, to the Positively Healthy Mom. Today's guest is Saleema Noon, who is a sexual health and empowerment educator. I'm so excited. So Saleema, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Coach Laura, for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So today is a big, juicy topic. We are going to be talking about sexual health education. And where should we get started? Because I know you're a big advocate about starting kids young, like in kindergarten. And my listeners are, the tweens and teen audience. And so why don't we just start there if we could, if you want to give maybe a quick background, why are you in this field? How did this get started? And fill us in on what we need to know.
Sure, no problem. Well, as you told your listeners, Laura, I am a sexual health and empowerment educator. So on a day-to-day basis, I go into schools, primarily elementary and middle schools, and I'm invited by parents to do a workshop for them first. And then that's followed by a series of what we call body science workshops, sexual health workshops for kids in kindergarten all the way through grade 9. I know it's not your typical career choice, but I tell grade 7s that I'm working with that when I was their age, my plan was to be, my plan A was to be a backup dancer for Madonna. I learned pretty quickly that wasn't going to pan out. So I thought I'd be a teacher. And in university, I took a number of different family studies courses, including one on sexual health, and really got interested in the topic. And then did my thesis research interviewing teenagers about their experience in sex ed. What they told me was that it was pretty much useless to them because what they were wanting to learn about wasn't addressed. The timing was off. It was relevant to their life. And this was back in the late 90s. It was even before, them living most of their social lives online. So there was a disconnect there. And it got me thinking, we need to get into schools a lot earlier and teach preventative, scientific sexual health information to our kids so that they can use that to make really smart decisions growing up that are going to keep them healthy and safe. And of course, a big piece of that is to partner with parents to support them to be their kids' number one source of information when it comes to all things growing up. And so, although a big chunk of what I do is working with students, another big chunk of what I do is supporting parents to have really important conversations with their kids. And whether it's coaching parents to talk about a specific topic, like sextortion or pornography or consent or OnlyFans, or it's coaching parents to talk about sexual health in general, I always break things down into 3 buckets. Here are the things you need to know about this topic. Here are the things you can do around this topic to help your kids. And here are the things you can say. And so I was hoping that you and I today could talk about a few of all of those when parents are talking to their kids about bodies and safety and their online lives and all that good stuff.
Perfect. I love those 3 categories. It makes it clean and simple and easy to understand. So should we start with the first one? What do parents need to know?
Sure. The parents I work with at all ages, generally speaking, want their kids to be informed and knowledgeable. They know that knowledge is power, and you can't make good decisions unless you have good information. What's more challenging, though, is how do I say it? When do I say it? What do I say? Because let's face it, I don't know what your experience was, Laura, but I certainly wasn't learning about sexual health from my parents over the dinner table growing up. It was just a completely different time, a different culture. And so now, because we didn't grow up with this information, it's not easy and it's a pretty daunting task. The 3 things that I want parents to know when it comes to talking to their kids about sexual health all have to do with protection, prevention, and preparation. Now, I know that the majority of your listeners have older kids, Laura, but for those parents who have younger kids, I always want them to know that little kids are the easiest to teach because they haven't learned yet that talking about sexual health and sexuality are still taboo subjects in our society. So just a quick example, when I'm in, let's say, a grade 1 class, and I tell the kids I'm going to teach them how to be body scientists, I'm going to teach them scientific information about their body, I'm going to teach them scientific words that doctors use. They love that idea. They hang on to my every word like it's the most interesting thing they've never, ever heard. There's no silliness or giggling because to them, it's just really interesting scientific information. By the time they get to grade 4 or 5, however, sorry, in the US, I know you say fourth and fifth grade.
That's okay. We
I
know
can
what you
speak
mean.
American too. Good thing.
Yeah, yeah.
By the time they get to, age 10, 11, 12, we call these people the gross meowers because even if their parents have been really open at home, they learn from their peers, from media, and our generally immature sexually immature society that this is something they should be embarrassed talking about. So questions I get from grade 4s and 5s are things like the other day it was, of all the jobs in the world you could have picked, why would you pick one as gross as this?
Oh, are you serious?
Or who convinced you to take this job? They just can't even believe I would want to talk about sex all day. That's a natural phase of development. But as much as possible, if parents can start talking early when our kids are open to learning this information and excited to learn about it, it'll just make our job easier as our kids move through that more uncomfortable, awkward, embarrassed phase. Now, the other thing I want parents to know, that the second of 3 things I want them to know, is the bottom line is, and this is true especially for older kids, preteens and teens, if we don't teach our kids, someone else is going to do it for us. It's not a question of if our kids will be exposed to pornography, it's when. And I mean, we can't control everything they're exposed to. I mean, yes, we can and should place reasonable boundaries and limits around what they're consuming at every age, but we can't control everything. What we can do is we can preload them with accurate, honest, scientific information that they can use to make smart decisions about what is in front of them and to think critically, for example, see content online. Not only in preloading our kids with information, we're educating them, but also we as parents are sending a really powerful and positive message to our kids that this is something we want to talk about with them. We may not always have the answers, but we want them coming to us with our questions because we want to be their go-to person. We don't want them learning about their body through watching pornography or Googling boobies. We don't want them just blindly believing an informant on the playground or an older sibling. We want them going to reliable adults like us to get their
Mm-hmm.
information. And
Yeah.
the good news is, and parents are always really comforted to know this, the good news is that talking about healthy bodies and healthy sexuality from a young age in no way increases their likelihood of experimenting sexually. In fact, we know from research all over the world that talking about sexual health with our kids from an early age actually delays their sexual debut, meaning they have
Mm-hmm.
sex later. One
Mm.
parent who can't get their you know?
Yeah, that's actually
So
really
it really is
interesting.
attention.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that research or kind of thought, but that's very true also with suicide. A lot of parents are afraid, like, don't mention the S word. It's such like a taboo word to talk about suicide in your family. And research shows that talking about it doesn't cause anyone to do it. It doesn't tempt anyone to do it. Talking about it actually lowers the likelihood to do it. So it sounds like it's the same with this topic.
Because in giving sexual health information and having these important conversations, we're giving them what we want, we're telling them what we want them to know, but we're also talking about boundaries and values and responsibilities. How, yes, this is what sex is, and these are the different ways that families are formed, for example. And it's nothing you need to worry about anytime soon because it comes with a lot of responsibilities, adult responsibilities. So this is all information for the future.
Yeah.
And, we can also teach our values. In our family, we're talking about this because I know you're mature enough to handle it. And I think you deserve to be informed and prepared. And I also want you to know that in our family, we prefer to wait till fill in the blanks after we're married to have sex for the first time or when we're a certain age. And the same thing would go for having a first kiss or when you start dating. Parents can fill in those blanks, to teach values as well. But we can also teach scientific information that's going to help them to make those smart decisions. I always joke with my older students that I remember I was around 12 or 13, I asked my dad, "Dad, when can I start dating?" And he replied, "You can start dating when you're married." They always tell me it's a stupid dad joke, but they always laugh.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Okay, so can you tell
So,
me the three P's again? Protection, prevention, and I lost track of the last one.
and preparation.
Okay, got it.
Prevention, protection, and preparation.
Okay.
Now, the last thing, Laura, I always want parents to know is that, again, research from all over the world tells
Mm-hmm.
us that kids who learn about this stuff early and continue to have these conversations with reliable adults in their life, like their parents and other people they're close to, are
Mm-hmm.
at reduced risk for sexual abuse.
Mm.
Children
And
need information to keep themselves out of exploitative situations. And
mm-hmm.
we can't wait for them to ask questions before we give them this information because some kids and teenagers just never do, right? But with giving sexual health information comes teaching the concept of consent. The
Mm,
idea that they say who goes on their body and who does not. And it can
mm,
start from a very young age. I mean, with our toddlers, we can give them choices as to where they get their diaper changed. Is it going to be in their bedroom or in the middle of the living room because it's convenient?
mm,
They might want to decide whether they have it changed standing up or lying down. We need
mm,
to be asking our kids, would it be
mm-hmm,
okay for me to help you wash your genitals in the bath right now?
mm. Interesting. Wow.
And another one that really one that really resonates with me because of how I was raised is, you know, well, when I was younger, my parents had dinner parties. Before I went off to bed, I was expected to go around the room and give every single person there a kiss and a hug goodnight. Whether I knew them or not, whether I felt like it or not, it was just a polite thing to do, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all about teaching respect and good manners, but we need to ask our kids, how do you want to say goodnight to our guests?
Mm, yeah.
Is it going to be a hug and a kiss? Maybe. But maybe it's just going to be a high five or a handshake or a simple good night, nice to meet you with some eye contact. But just in giving our kids those choices, we are teaching them that they're the boss. It's what we call bodily autonomy, that they have a right to their personal space. And it's kids who learn from an early age that they have a right to that are going to be just finding it way easier to practice consent in their future relationships. And when our kids are in middle and high school and are entering some of their first relationships, we
Mm-hmm.
want them to understand that, right? That
Yeah.
concept of consent is key.
I see. And that's where that empowerment piece comes in, it sounds like, which is so important, and not just in person in those young first relationships in, middle school or high school, but also, the whole online world can be incredibly scary. I actually just got educated. I went to a seminar about, sex trafficking and, how much of that just happens where it's so subtle, kids don't really realize what's going on. Like, oh, this person's being nice to me, or they this, and then before you know it, and this is all virtual. It's kids from around the world, but they're being guided by adults online to do these things, and then the sextortion comes into play. If you do, then they start to make threats. If you don't do these things, I'll expose you. And, that can lead to some very severe life ending consequences. Is that something that you educate on as well?
Absolutely. That'll be a whole other podcast topic, Laura. We could do that another day. But that is a really good example of a terrifying yet real subject that parents need to be talking to their preteens and teens about today. And with that comes educating our people that, your body is the most special, important, private thing you own. And when your body is the most private thing there is, and the internet is the most public space we have, the two don't go together.
Right.
So if someone starts asking you for photos of your private body, just know that that's not okay and come
Mm-hmm.
talk to me about it.
Yeah.
The
And even
concept
if
of
you
consent really applies.
Right, right. And even if you think, oh, that would never happen to my child would never do that. It's, you got to play it safe on this topic, and it's better to be really proactive. I assume you're agreeing with that you just have to, because so many of us live in a bubble.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, it's safe to go to Target, it's safe to go to the mall, it's safe to go to the grocery store. And so therefore my child on their iPad or their phone is safe, right? And parents, because we were not raised during this time, we're not fully aware of all the threats. A lot of us are still unaware, unfortunately. So this is the type of thing that I'm so happy and thankful that there's people like you out there speaking to large audiences and informing them of these things. Okay, so what's next? What else do parents need to know? Or if we want to move on to the do.
Smart things to do. Yeah, let's move on to smart things to do. So, like I said, the majority of parents do want to talk about this stuff. They know it's important. They want to be proactive, but then how, right? Well, there are a few key things I suggest that parents don't do. Why don't we start with those? So the first one is don't ambush your kids. So don't walk into their room when they're chatting with their friends or playing a game they love and say, "Hey, we need to talk." No one wants to hear those words, right?
Yeah.
So we need to
Yeah.
pick our time really carefully. I
Mm-hmm.
also strongly encourage parents to not ask personal questions,
Mm.
especially around sensitive topics. It's going to
Okay.
shut our preteens and teens down because they're going to interpret that as you trying to pry into the details of their private life. So
Mm-hmm.
don't ask personal questions.
Okay.
These next two are that I am personally guilty of as I raised my stepdaughters.
Uh-huh.
Uh, don't talk too long.
Mm.
So keep it 2 to 5 minutes for a conversation about something you want to talk about,
Okay.
max. But have lots of these little conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And also do more listening than talking.
Okay.
So don't
Tell us a
talk
little
too
bit about
much and don't talk too long.
that.
So we have so much to learn from our kids. We really do. And so ideally, we would ask a question, we would ask for their thoughts in a really general way, and then we would let them talk. And this is when we get into what we can do to have engaging conversations. Let them be the expert. They love sharing their wisdom with us, right? So pick an opener. So, for example, you could say, I was reading an article the other day and it said that the majority of preteens have seen pornography before. Does that sound accurate to you? Tell me more about that. So we're asking a general question. We're asking for their insight. We want them to teach us, and that's going to keep them talking way longer than we need to talk or you're not watching porn, are you? That's going to get you nowhere. So we need to use effective conversation starters that really position us as being curious, right?
Yeah.
You know more
Yeah.
about this than I do. You're the teenager, so teach me. Now, another thing we need to do when we're talking to our preteens and teens or kids of all ages is to be honest. Just be honest, because that is going to help them to trust you as a credible source of information. A quick story. Years ago, a friend of mine called me after drop off. Her daughter was in grade 4 at the time. And in the chaos of getting to school, carpooling, they were listening to the radio. And her daughter asked, "Mom, what's a hoe?" Short form for the word whore, derogatory term for a sex worker. And my friend, understandably, had no idea what to say, nor did she feel like getting into it right then and there. And so she just very calmly replied, "A hoe is a gardening tool."
Wow. I mean, yes, I
So
could see
now,
that. Like if you're, taken
yeah,
aback, there's no time to
understandable.
answer. You're in shock. You just have to give an answer. Like I'm sure like things like that happen all the time. And you're just like, whoa, I wasn't ready for this. Yeah.
Exactly. So understandable, but she was calling me to make sure her answer was okay. My concern though was that if she's asking her mom what a hoe is, her friends are asking their parents what a hoe is, and there's going to be one brave parent in the group who's going to tell the truth. So she's probably going to learn what a hoe really is on the playground at recess. And is she going to go to mom with her next question? Maybe not, because she didn't get a scientific, honest answer. So at every age, I can't stress enough that parents need to be honest with their kids. And if they can't think of an answer to the question right away, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I'm so glad you asked me that scientific question. Let me think about how best to answer it for you.
That's great.
We'll talk about it while we're walking the dog tonight. We'll talk about it before bed. Bedtime is great at any age because they will do anything to stop you from turning out the light and walking out the door, right? So you got them captive.
Yes.
But some parents feel that they don't want to miss their opportunity. And so they answer when they're not sure what to say and they come across flustered and nervous, which of course isn't what we want to do because we don't want to convey that message to our kids. We want to be cool as a cucumber. And if we need to take some time, then that's fine.
Yeah.
We don't need to
Yeah.
have a slick set of answers to every question right on the spot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, another thing that works really well is when parents, if they're comfortable, share personal experiences that
Okay.
resonate with their kids.
And what would be
So,
an example of that?
when my kids were going through puberty and feeling a bit self conscious about how their bodies were developing, I remember telling them that in grade 7, my nickname, the boys in my class gave it to me, was mosquito bites, referring to the small size of my breasts. In fact, I was the only girl in grade 7 that didn't wear a bra. And that was difficult, and I didn't have the skills, the assertiveness skills that we're teaching kids today to say to those boys, I don't like it when you call me that. I want you to stop.
Yeah.
So I remember using stories like that to connect with my girls and to help them understand that, yeah, we all go through this, whether we feel our body is changing too fast or too slow, we're too tall, we're too short, we're too skinny, we're too fat. That's just part of going through puberty, and we need to support each other and remember that how we look is only a small piece of who we are. What's more important is what our bodies can do for us and to appreciate that, right? So again, if parents are comfortable, and I respect that everyone's comfort level is different, sharing experiences like that. When our kids get to be in the teenage years, it can progress to sharing experiences about relationships and breakups and maybe even first sexual experiences. We don't need to get into details, but what was that like for us? And I find that preteens and teens really appreciate being let into our lives in that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is
So
fantastic.
stories and experiences really keep our kids engaged. We also have to be careful that we're not, just speaking of relationships, we're not making any assumptions about our kids. Like, I wouldn't suggest asking a teenager, "So, do you have a boyfriend?" We can't assume that our daughter, for example, would want to date a guy. We need to choose more inclusive language to say, well, first of all, I wouldn't just come out and say, "Are you in a relationship?" I would say, "So, are many people your age in relationships these days?" When I was your age, we didn't really have boyfriends and girlfriends. But when we are asking questions, we got to make sure we're inclusive to say, "Are you in a relationship?" Or "Do you have a partner?" Or "Is so and so wanting to be in a relationship?" rather than "Do they wish they had a girlfriend?" You get
Right.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Oh yeah, there's zero rapport there. It's if you're just totally, we can't do that. So okay, so what about the conversation piece? What are the things that we should say? And that was an example actually of
Yeah,
what
this is the fun part. So
yeah yeah. So what else is there?
yeah,
Anything
I
else?
always like to I always like to start out with what not to say. Parents quite find that quite entertaining, and it's also, I'm not exempt. I mean, I teach this stuff, and I can think of a few of these phrases that I've used in my parenting. But there are certain things that will shut a conversation right down, and that's not what we do want to do, of course. So I would never suggest for a parent to say, for example, "You're too young to know that."
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, I
Because
wouldn't
what
say
are they
that
going
either.
to do? They're going to Google it, or they're going to ask someone else's parent, or they're going to talk to an informant on the playground.
Mm-hmm.
So never say you're too young.
Mm-hmm.
Just referring back to what we were saying earlier about not asking personal questions. So I wouldn't want a parent to ever say, "You're not doing that, are you?" I read an article about teens sending nudes and how they're doing it even as young as grade 6 and 7. "You're not doing that, are you?"
Right. That accusatory tone, it's just going to shut them down immediately.
Yes,
And then they're probably just going to lie if
exactly.
that's
So
right there.
again,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, they're just being put on the spot. So they're not going to be honest, and they're certainly not going to want to continue the conversation if you're accusing them or shaming them about something they have or haven't done, right? Another one we wouldn't want parents to say is, "Go ask your dad."
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
So, a lot of parents think that, I'm the mom, I should talk to my daughter, and he's the dad, and he should talk to his son because I don't have a body that's the same as his. But in a perfect world, our kids and teens would know that they could talk to any adult that they're close to, regardless of their gender. Because if a question is asked and we can't relay an answer based on personal experience, well, we can figure it out. There's plenty of ways to figure out answers to questions about bodies that don't look like ours. So, again, from a young age, we want our kids to know that they can talk to either of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's
And
wonderful.
and if they're not comfortable talking to either of us, well then here are other adults that are in our inner circle that we trust.
Mm.
For example, I gave my stepdaughters permission from a young age to talk to my sister rather. She's the cool aunt. And I understand that growing up, the girls may want to talk to her about stuff that they don't necessarily want to talk to me or their dad about. That's okay. All I want to know is that they're getting good information and they're getting support around whatever they need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to take a quick
And I know my sister
pause.
didn't tell me everything.
Yeah, right. Which is fine.
Yep.
She needed to keep their trust. But I want to take a quick pause because I just imagine my listeners, some of them are probably like, oh, yeah, I'm doing all the things right. I'm doing it right. I'm doing it the way the expert is saying here. And there's other ones that I'm imagining are like, oh, this is still too weird. It's too scary. It's too uncomfortable. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I once had a friend who taught me something she had learned, and I've kept that information with me ever since, and I've used it with my own kids, which is she talked about, talking about the body parts from a very young age, even, from the time they were babies. And she's like, you guys, it doesn't have to be weird. It's just like your elbow or your knee, right? And then going through the body parts. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's true. It is just another body part, or it is just this. And when I love how you're like, this is a scientific answer. Let me think of this, right? And so that's where I wanted to think of just for a minute, because I do think that there's going to be probably half of these people that are like, right? And so it's like getting comfortable with the information yourself, so that therefore you're not going into their bedroom and sitting them down and lecturing. You're not going in there and shaming them or accusing them, right? And so it's almost like the work comes first with the adult. in order to prepare themselves to be able to feel comfortable and open to not do these, the kind of wrong way and do the right way. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Laura. I totally understand and respect that for lots of different reasons, not all parents are comfortable with this. And even if they are comfortable, they don't know where to start. And it's never too late. I can't stress that enough. There are so many great resources that parents can lean on. I say, call in your B team. Your B team are, the cool aunt, the great book that you picked up on Amazon, the workshop that you signed up for, online resources. Just one that comes to mind right away is called amaze.org. It's a collection of 2 to 3 minute animated YouTube videos on all things to do with sexual health and relationships. And parents can explore these resources first to get used to the material, get a script, and then talk to their kids. I've got a hour-long free webinar that parents can watch on demand. It's called What Not to Say When Talking About Bodies and Online Safety and What to Say Instead. It's kind of an extension of what we're talking about today, but it gives parents a script as to, okay, here's how you can explain, for example, what sex is. How you can explain to a teenager why the decision to be in a sexual relationship is such a major one. Here's how you can teach your values around that. So parents aren't alone. And if they can access resources that are available to them, there's lots on my website. I'll make sure I give them that address a bit later. Then they can get used to the language and the content first and then have those conversations.
Okay, so before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to share that would be important for the moms and parents to hear today?
Yeah, I just wanted to, why don't we end our conversation by focusing on what parents can do to have really engaging conversations about sexual health with their kids. And
Perfect.
it's often, you know, what's really key is having a good conversation starter. So, to give you an example, with my own kids, I would often start an important conversation about something I wanted to address with them with, this might be too much information, but I feel like you're mature enough to handle it.
Yeah,
Immediately,
I
I
like
had
that.
their attention,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or a lot of parents, a lot of parents don't talk to their kids about this stuff at your age, but I don't know. I feel like you'll be able to understand it. So set them
Mm-hmm.
up for success in that way. Help them rise to the occasion. We need to be really affirming as well. They can never, especially in their preteen and teen years, they can never hear too much of things like, I'm so grateful that you trust me for this with this information. I'm so grateful that you feel comfortable talking to me about your life. Or I'm so impressed by the way you're thinking about this topic. Or I'm so impressed by the scientific questions you're asking me. A
Yeah.
big one would be, I trust you. I trust you to make decisions. I trust you to make smart decisions, both in your real life and your online relationships. I trust you. And those words are going to ring in their ears when you're not around, right?
I
So,
absolutely love that. Yeah.
so it's about setting the conversation up. Oh, and another big one is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on something. Do you have a few minutes? So again, you're making them the expert and a few minutes. They know that you're not gonna lecture them for the next hour, which is what nobody wants, right? So I call it giving little body science boosters at every age. Just 2, 3 minute conversations here and there when the topic comes up naturally. When my kids were younger, we used to watch Modern Family together, for example. And
Mm-hmm.
the deal was that I had the right to pause the PVR anytime I wanted to, so that we could debrief on storylines or humor to make sure we're all on the same page, and I could fill in the gaps with information I wanted them to have. They probably stayed up later than they typically would. That was part of the deal too. But it was a great opportunity for me to make sure that I could give them the information I wanted them to have in a really fun and unintimidating way. So taking opportunities like that, when something relevant is happening in your family, or sharing a TikTok video, we can, again, give those body science boosters to normalize the topic in our home. And I think that honesty also goes a long way, even with teenagers. For parents who may not feel super comfortable talking about this stuff and feel like they kind of missed the boat, um, you know, tell your teen. I was listening to Coach Laura's podcast today, and I have to say, I haven't done a lot of talking about sexual health with you. And looking back, I wish I started earlier. Maybe this is because I didn't learn about this stuff from my own parents, so I feel uncomfortable, but I know it's important. So I want you to know that I'm here for you. You can ask me anything, and if I don't know an answer, I'll get it to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So especially older kids and teenagers appreciate that honesty.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, it's all about, building that connection, building the trust, the open communication, the lack of judgment, the being curious, not critical. I think this just goes so far with that relationship, all these conversation pointers and the do's and the don'ts that you're giving us today. So this has been fantastic. Where can people find you going forward? And I know you have an offer for the listeners, so tell us about that.
Yes, so I have created a resource for your listeners, Laura, and I'll make sure that I give you the link to that so you can put it in the show notes. And as well, I invite your listeners to subscribe to my newsletter, where every 2 weeks they'll receive a Smart Things to Say resource that will follow up on all the things that we talked about today, in terms of when it comes to any topic to do with sexual health or online safety or growing up. Here are the smart things you need to know about it. Here are the smart things you need to do about it. And here are some smart things that you can say. So it breaks down intimidating topics in a really simple way for parents. So I invite them to subscribe to the newsletter. But I think the easiest way for parents to access some free resources that I have for them, as well as learn more about my workshops, is go to my website, SaleemaNoon.com. And they can also find me on Instagram at Saleema Noon Educators.
Perfect. Okay. We'll be sure to put all those links in the notes. Salima, this has been fantastic. I feel like I personally learned so much from you today. And so I know my listeners probably did as well. So thank you. And I hope everybody signs up. I know I'm going to sign up for your newsletter, and I will be sure to spread it around to all my friends.
Sounds great, Laura. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun to talk to you.
Fantastic. Likewise. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends.